Good morning. Welcome back to our garden. It is another beautiful early morning. We're outside before it gets too hot and even before the kids get up. Matt is taking care of all those chores around the homestead, and this morning I'm going to be taking care of beans. Yesterday we were out in the garden and planted green beans in every open spot. Where our garlic was, we've got 5 rows of beans in here. Where our cabbage was, we have a few rows of beans in there. In between where some peppers didn't come up, more beans. And where we pulled some kohlrabi this week, more beans. So this will actually be our second harvest off of our green beans this year. We were able to harvest the other day a large glass bowl full of beans, get them washed up, pressure canned, and it made 3 quarts and 1 pint of green beans we'll be able to put in storage for later in the year. So I brought out reinforcements today, my 2 larger bowls, and I did bring a small knife to cut the beans if need be. Usually I just use my fingernail, but I'll show you how I'm doing that. Now our beans are in 3 rows over here. We've got 3 rows of contender bush beans, and so far we really seem to like those. We also have 1 row, I'll leave the name of the bean down below, but it's a purple or reddish bean, and those have been really easy to pick. So I'm going to do those last in case the kids get up before I'm finished, because they really like picking them because they're very easy to find. So one of my biggest wishes with my garden, things that I would change, is that I would space my things out more so I had more room to plant all the things I want and make easy harvest of it. That is something that's been a little more tricky in our garden. It's actually a pretty large garden, but just based on the sheer amount of things we want to grow and room we need to do that, things are pretty close together, but we make it work. So I would say I was out here picking green beans maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and they are more than ready for me to pick. When I am snapping green beans off the stem, I did bring that knife. That's more so if my fingernail gets tired of this, but I do something one of my kids taught me, is if I just put my fingernail right below where the green bean starts on the stem, I can just snap it off, and I've already got that piece off, and I won't have to do it in the house. While I'm out here, I snap the bottoms off too usually, and just kind of toss them to the ground for compost. Now I was talking to my brother and sister-in-law, and they were talking about how they don't snip the bottoms anymore because it's just an extra step. And I thought that was a really interesting thought. So I asked some of my canning gurus if there were any safety concerns with not doing that, and they confirmed that that should be fine as long as they're washed properly. So I could forego that step as well. What I'm going to tell you is right now I have the time for it, so I do it, but I probably later in the season I can see skipping that step. With my last bean harvest, after I got them all washed, we were sitting down as a family to watch Little House on the Prairie. That is our family favorite right now. And I think we're on like somewhere in season 2 or 3. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to snap those beans because I like to make them in smaller pieces, even though I've snapped the tops and bottoms off before I can them. And I sat down to do it, and Eli came over and said, "Can I help?" And I said, "Yeah." So he watched me do maybe 1 bean, and then he helped snap them. I'll throw in a little clip of it because it was so cute.
Can I go for this?
Uh-oh, how are you going to get through? Thank you. Can you these beans? Come on.
What is that?
I don't know. Did you see a bug?
It was a hoppy. I see some bowling, and I have to pick.
Just the big ones, okay?
I know, Mom. My own bowl.
Your own bowl.
Oh, this mine. Mom, can I go with you? I can put this in a bowl with snaps on them. Then, because I don't want to.
You just do your best. Just try not to rip the plants out, please.
Okay. Where is it? Stinker Panty. You stinker. You stinker. Oh.
Now, the way I've been harvesting these beans, leaving that top tip on, the only thing I have been concerned about is that maybe I'm slowing down the green bean production because they're still focusing on growing that bean that I've already picked off. So that's been my only concern. It's just so much more efficient. That's worth trying. Now, I did it this way last year, but I can't remember if I did it the entire season. I think I did without any issues. But there doesn't seem to be a ton of beans on here like I thought there were. The problem with green beans is when they're ready to be picked, you almost need to pick them or you end up with just gigantic beans. When we switched over to getting that electric pressure canner, we used the Presto electric pressure canner. It was a huge difference because I can can small amounts just as easily as I would be like cooking dinner. So that helps a lot because even if I don't end up with a huge bean harvest, I know I can still can some jars up of the green beans. Now the last batch I did, I ended up throwing some jars of just water in there, even without tops, just so that it was full and not bouncing around. So theoretically, if I do that, even if I only had, say, a jar full, but I had other jars full of something in there, I would be able to go ahead and still process my beans. Where if I'm taking out the stovetop one and going through all that trouble and all that work, it just doesn't seem worth it. I don't know, maybe a jar or two of beans probably isn't worth it for most people either way, but for me, it's just something else I'm getting on my shelf and preserving. In years past, I had to just freeze our beans because we would get so few at a time, and just pressure canning wasn't an option. Now, we have done like dilly beans, and those are kind of fun to do and don't require pressure canning. You can water bath those. But what we found is that we really just need a veggie source for our family. We have 4 kids and we go through a lot of vegetables when it comes to mealtime. We're typically home for 3 meals a day all summer, and a good chunk of us are home for most meals during the school year. So it means we need to have a lot of vegetables on hand if we don't want to be buying too many from the store. So if it seems like I'm planting my whole garden in green beans, pretty much am. I think I'm going to wait closer to a week next time I come out here. But I definitely plan that based on just looking at the beans and looking at the size of some of them. And like I said, some are just, they get really big if you let them go. Now, what I found is if I miss 1 or 2 and they're just too big to eat, instead of picking them, I just leave them on the plant, because when they dry out, I'll be able to use them for seed for green beans for next year. And we were able to save quite a bit of seed last year. I actually don't have any of that seed planted, and the reason being is I just had bought so much other seed, so I wanted to make sure I got some of these different varieties in the ground before I planted that. I believe all the beans that I just got planted were all top crop beans. So those, I can't remember if we grew them last year or if this will be our first year. But the contender beans we're growing here are the variety we really like. Now, while real food definitely has bug damages and imperfections, whenever I'm canning, I do try to adhere to kind of a safety level, just of making sure that the food I'm preserving for family and friends is the safest it can be. So I do my best to follow all the tips and advice from the National Center for Home Food Preservation when it comes to canning techniques. That is something that over the last few years I've been learning more and more about. I definitely have been canning for a long time. My family pressure canned meat growing up. Matt's family pretty much water bath canned a lot of things, many things. So we both had some familiarity with canning in general, but I learned more and more about what is safe, what isn't, and just honestly following that website is a huge help if you're not sure about something. There's so many recipes and things on the internet these days that it can be a little bit scary. And green beans are the #1 problem food when it comes to canning. And I think a big reason that is because a lot of people water bath can them, and the only way you can do that is dilly beans or something like that safely. And since my family eats a ton of green beans, it's definitely up there with our favorite vegetables, I want to be sure that we're doing it correctly. So we're up in the kitchen. We got all those green beans washed, rinsed, cleaned, and the kids and I snapped them into some little pieces while we were watching a show. That works out so good. And it's time to get them pressure canned. Now, if you were watching the last time I used my Presto electric canner, I was actually water bathing in them, and a few of you mentioned that you didn't know they could do that, and yes, they can. There's actually just a dial to switch between pressure can and a boiling water bath. So yes, you can water bath in these. So lots of ways you can use them. The only thing you can't do is water bath quarts, and that's just because they're not tall enough. Now, since you saw me using my Presto digital canner last time, Matt did something. He went ahead and ordered me a second one. So this is actually my second Presto digital canner. And why might a person need to simply just to be able to harvest, to preserve the harvest faster? So I know when we were pressure canning meat, it sure would have been handy to have more going. We actually were able to borrow someone's and we had 2 going at the same time, but it would be nice to be able to do 2 on our own and not have to depend on others to be able to use theirs. So this is the newer model, and honestly I didn't read through the book too much, being I kind of know what I'm doing, but the newer model has a new stand, so it's a little more closer to the bottom once you put it in. There also is there used to be 3 lines for the water, and you only ever filled to the bottom line. So they changed that, and now there's just 1 line, which does make more sense. And they changed where the vent is. So the vent here is in the front as opposed to the back, since you're like reaching over to put this on and pull it off. I know when I was using this, it did seem a little bit more stable too. But other than that, everything seems to be pretty much the same. So I am going to go ahead and get started pressure canning our quarts of green beans. I don't expect we will have too many. Now I filled my jars half full with water and I'm just setting them in. I did use filtered water inside the pot. So the manual for this machine says you can fit 4 of the wide mouth jars in here, but Presto themselves says if you can fit it, you can do it. So 5 fit for me. So, oh, this is gonna throw me off. All right, I'm gonna put the top on. Ooh, it very much snaps into place, the green lock. So it's kind of hard to see, but it says pressure can here, and if I turn the knob, it says boiling water bath canner. Since we're doing green beans, we're going to pressure can. You can either push this middle button or play. And then we just select the time. And pressure canning quarts of green beans is 25 minutes. And then it says insert jars. I already did that step, so now it's just warming up. So after our last video where I was canning peaches, I mentioned that just being able to can with someone else is really wonderful because you learn new tips and tricks, and everybody does things just a little bit differently. So it's just something really fun. And a few of you asked what things I've changed since then. And I've made one little change that I find I'm now doing all the time. I am very blessed with a decent sized kitchen where I can work. I have a long counter space, and typically I was doing all of my canning, my packing my jars on my countertop. And the one thing that bothered me is I really don't have any counter space by my stove. I just never have. This is all I've got, enough spot to put maybe a spoon. So one thing when I was canning with someone else is they were packaging the items on the stovetop, and I thought this was really interesting. I have a really large cutting board that's plastic. I don't specifically love using it on my stovetop, but it worked. I was really surprised. We put it on this side and we just kind of were able to fill everything right here. And then I could keep my hot water boiling if I was using hot water, or keep whatever I had on my stovetop cooking. And that was a problem I was constantly having, was usually Matt and I would kind of tag team filling jars, because I would have to remove this from the stovetop, put it on the countertop, quick fill everything while we were quick capping everything and then getting it back in. So nothing really cooled down. And it just drove me nuts because I could never keep it hot. So this kind of alleviated that problem. It was something really silly, just as simple as having something on the side of my stovetop so that I can package right here. Now, first time I did it, I made a gigantic mess. So I'm kind of learning what works and what doesn't. Now, the only reason I have boiling water today is because I'm going to fill my green bean jars with boiling water. So I just have a little cutting board here, nothing special, just so I can set my jars on, because they're already going to be packed with green beans. And I'm going to do that sitting down at the table, because why am I doing all this extra standing at my countertops when it's unnecessary? So I'll be packing at the table and bringing them over here. And who cares if it goes across my kitchen? I need the steps, right? So and then I'm going to fill it with water. And there's a few things I always have, set up when I'm getting ready to can. So I use a lot of hot pads. I noticed canning with someone else, they used a lot of towels. I tend to just use hot pads. I trust them better as far as keeping my hand from getting burnt and not slipping, because the towel usually has to be folded up a couple times. And then I am using just a shish kebab stick for debubbling. I don't use anything fancy. I know they make special things for this. I just don't have one. And I always have shish kebab sticks. A funnel, and then today I'm using a measuring cup. Sometimes I'll use a small measuring cup for pouring things, and sometimes I'll be using a ladle. And honestly, it just depends on what I'm doing. So I do like having a measuring cup either way, because I tend to just set my funnel here, and I'm missing one thing. All right, I went and got it. I have a rag with some vinegar on it, and this is just for wiping the rings of my jars before I get them all packed up to go back in the canner. Now, the Presto electric canner, as far as pressure canning, I actually enjoy it quite a bit more than I do water bathing in it. And I think it's just because I still have to heat up my kitchen because I'm heating up water. But now for this recipe, I'm heating up water anyways. So it just kind of is what it is. It tends to be that when I'm canning, it is the hottest times of the year when I don't necessarily want to be heating up my kitchen. But it is what it is. This is the space I have to use. And my canner's all ready. So this water's not quite boiling, so I will have to wait till it's ready. That is the nice thing about having the electric canner, is those jars can just sit and wait until this is ready. I have to show you, I also got 2 new things in the mail. Some new rugs. I'm so excited. So these aren't actually rugs. These are, gosh, I can't even remember the name for them. But they are like a padded mat to just kind of give you some relief in the kitchen. And I don't know, people are always giving me I'm wearing purple socks. People are always giving me a hard time because I do not wear shoes in my house. I kind of just don't like it. I don't like that. So I got these mats to help alleviate some of the stress while I'm in the kitchen, and I'm just so excited about them. They actually came today and they were rolled up, so I've had some boxes on them trying to get them down, but it couldn't be more perfect timing right as I'm about to do some canning and be in the kitchen a lot. And like I said, I'm going to try to sit at the table when I can, so I'm not over the top doing things, but So exciting. I will leave a link to these down below because so far I am loving them. I don't know about you, but most of these padded mats I don't care for the look of, but these ones almost look like rugs. They're still padded mats, and they're the kind of the easy to wipe off, which is great as far as spilling and things go, because the rug we had in here was beautiful, but it was dirty. So excited. My water on the stove is boiling, so I'm gonna go ahead and start filling my jars. I'm gonna take my regulator off because I know it comes off. We're just gonna dump these one at a time. I'm gonna dump it right in my sink because I do not need this extra water in there. Let's fill the jar. So I'm not doing anything too special to fill these jars. I put beans in, and sometimes I kind of like to shake them a little bit so they kind of fall into place a bit. But it is really hard to alleviate all those air bubbles, so that's kind of why I'm doing that, trying to not have so many spaces of air. Now these really pretty purple beans, they actually turn green when you can them, which I knew. I'm sure if you freeze them or dehydrate or freeze dry them, they probably keep their purple color, but I've never done it. Well, I've frozen beans, but I've never frozen the purple ones. This is my first year growing them. So you're gonna leave 1 inch headspace between at the top of your jars, and 1 inch on these jars is this bottom lip, so it's pretty easy to figure out where that's at. 1 quart of green beans calls for 1 teaspoon of canning and pickling salt. So I just put that on top, and we're gonna add our water. So the water I am adding, it's actually boiling, so I'm gonna be really careful, and I'm going to just be adding it to the jar, leaving a 1 inch headspace again. Now after I go ahead and poke for air bubbles, I'm probably going to need to top it off because you'll find some of the liquid will go down into those spaces that you got rid of. So when I use this stick, I'm just going around mainly the outer edge, but I go around as much as I can. I don't want to be poking holes in my beans, not my goal. My goal is to just get rid of all those pockets of air. Alright, once you find that you're not getting a lot more bubbles coming to the top, then I go ahead and top it off. Now I'm still leaving that 1 inch headspace. Wipe off the rim of my jar. I'm going to trap it. Like I said, mine always has to face the front so I can read it, have the label face in the front. So I just gently put my finger here so it stays in place. I've noticed with the electric canner that I need to twist my tops just a little bit more, and then it's going back in the canner. I'll get the next one out and dumped. So I ended up with 3 full quarts, which is awesome. I'm actually leaving the other quarts in here just with water in them that every time. You know what upgrade they did not change on this model? There's still nowhere to put the lid. Presto, come on. So I leave the other ones in there with the water in them just so everything's not bouncing around while it's coming up to pressure. And you could certainly cap them and then save that water so you have like sanitizing water, but I actually do have a couple jars of that before I realized I didn't need to cap them So learn something new, right? So I filled the jars. I go ahead and I press play, and it says it's heating up. I made sure the regulator's off, and I'm just double checking the instructions. I feel like this is kind of, after you do it a few times, you just kind of get the hang of it, and it tells you, it will beep like crazy to put this regulator on when it's ready. So I'm not worried about that, but it says confirm that the regulator is not on the cover. And so now it's just heating and getting up to temp. So we'll wait, and it will start beeping at me, and I'll let you know when it does. So now that it's heated up, it says vent 10 minutes. It's gonna count down 10 minutes, and then it'll beep at me like crazy. All right, you hear that? See that? Put regulator on. It spells it out for you. All right, so I'm going to put this on the canning position, and there we go. And then I press play. And now it's counting down. All right, so just finished beeping at me. It is done with the pressure canning, and now it's on to cooling. So this is the longest part. Now you guys, I didn't even notice. Matt came in here a few minutes ago. I was like, did it come with that giant dent in the side? I don't know how well you can see that. So when it was pressure canning, it actually sucked the inside, like the side in. And I just let it go. It's pretty late at night, so I am actually going to call Presto in the morning. I've heard of this happening with other people, or happening with Instapots and things like that, where the pressure is just so high. So, you know what? I just noticed a new feature. I love this. See the little spoke, little pipe sticking up there? My other one is behind, kind of in between the green and the handle. It's really hard to tell if it's up or not, so that must have been a complaint. So awesome to see that they moved that to make it a lot more obvious that it's up and you shouldn't open it. But this is kind of a bummer. Honestly, the food in there is probably just fine, but being it's green beans and they're a little more temperamental, I will probably just throw these beans, either drain them and throw them in the freezer, unless they're gonna get too mushy, or just throw them in the fridge and eat them. We are a family of 6. 3 quarts of green beans will last us less than a week. So it is what it is. But let's move forward, and I definitely will keep you posted, maybe at the end of this video or such, what they say and what they think of that. So it is cooling down, and if you're in the kitchen, you'll hear this little pipe pop down before it is ready to open. So it's kind of nice that that pops down, and then there also are, you know, all the other safety features that it's not going to open up. This is still indented, so I don't know, not really sure. This, when I turn it, if for some reason there was something funky going on here, it is literally a hole, so any pressure would be able to shoot out there. And then I will open it by turning it, so it can't even, the lid can't pop off or anything like that. It is done. You're gonna open it with me. Hold my hand, right? And I am going to, they say to just push this X for 3 seconds, and it kind of turns it off. I've definitely done it both ways. I'm gonna unplug this right away so I don't forget. And then I am going to turn this knob. No shooting spot of anything coming out of there. Still indented though. And turn this here. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and canning beans with me. I would love to hear what you're up to canning and preserving. Glad you got to see me again. Bye.